Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. This is my 10th episode with Coach Dan John, and it is my favorite so far. Be ready to cry, laugh, and think with us during this hour. Dan is extremely thoughtful and insightful, and I've been on an extraordinary journey with him, exploring the philosophies of The Sword and the Stone by T.H. White. I am fascinated by the parallels between the stories in the book and how it pertains to modern life. In this episode, we explore a simple quote in the book. It is unfair. Those three words are the catalyst to an in-depth philosophical discussion on life lessons and education. I absolutely love this conversation and will be thinking about it for a very long time. Coach Dan John is a world-renowned strength coach and mentor to many in the fitness industry. Dan has competed at the highest levels of Olympic lifting, Highland Games, and the weight pentathlon. He has authored numerous books and continues to educate through his coaching and workshops worldwide. One of the ways I am able to keep this podcast going is through my supporters on Patreon. If you have been enjoying these conversations as much as I have, you can donate to the show on my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. Thank you all who have been supporting me thus far. I appreciate you, and I could not do this without you. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Dan. Always lovely to see you.
Well, thank you. Good to see you. It doesn't seem like it's been terribly long, but I'm guessing it's been months, not weeks.
Yes. We try to do at least quarterly. I've been kind of pushing the envelope and checking in with you slightly ahead of schedule just in case, but always lovely to see you. So.
You're always welcome. And it's good to see the sword and stone over your shoulder.
Yes.
You have yours over your right shoulder and I have mine over my left shoulder.
I know.
When we stare at each other, they're on the same.
Exactly.
Right.
This
I'm
is
glad
nice.
we planned that.
It's alignment. Yes. I had mentioned pre-roll, I've moved it from, where it would lay and wanted to kind of I had actually a blank space there. And I was like, oh, actually the perfect book right now would be The Sword and the Stone, since that is our journey that I've been so privileged to be on with you. So lots of fun there. We actually, I think we'll jump right into that today. It's been kind of fun because we've been really taking it slow through the chapters, and I appreciate that because I love the deep dive into it and keep revisiting that theme of the reread and how important that is in so many other areas of my life. And of course, it takes me back to the journey that you and I started. So last episode, we were in the middle of chapter 9. And so I thought, everything is so relevant in The Sword and the Stone. So I hate to just kind of skip around, but basically the place we left off was right before Kay kind of goes to bat for, Ward goes to bat for Kay, telling Merlin, let's get him, an adventure and everything like that, which of course leads us into the really exciting part. But I did want to bring up that there was the fight, right? The actual fight between Kay, the physical fight between Kay and Wart, in which, of course, Wart doesn't admit to it. He says, I ran into the bedpost or something like that. And there was just that kind of, fight between brothers. I think it's on page 194.
Okay, I'm just scrolling down right now. So I'm, it'll just take another second or so. But there is a comment right off the, we can talk I don't know how current events you want to be, but.
Yes, bring it in.
And it's not going to be comfortable for some people, but I think you know where I'm heading. As we're talking today, Will Smith walked up to Chris Rock, I think it was the other night.
At the Oscars.
Slapped him across the face. Now, a couple of things I want to comment. First, when I went on the news the next day, all the information about the Ukraine war was not on the front pages.
Right.
It was shoved down because two Hollywood guys hit each other, which, no offense, I felt like it was like two kittens tumbling over yarn, in my opinion. Calling that a slap was a reach. Okay, we'll say that right now. Somebody asked me the next day what I thought about it. And I thought, well, when I was at St. Veronica's, the good sisters of the Holy Infant Jesus, the Irish nuns, would have taken the two of us and put us in a room and said, finish it. And what would have happened is we would have gone like this a few times and we would have hugged each other and it'd be over.
Mm-hmm,
now, the reason I say that is that sometimes when you're watching, something like that, it is so, this is a particularly interesting one because it was so public. Everyone thought it was staged for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was watching it, I was like, what is happening right now?
Now, it's interesting because in what I found interesting is the reaction. Now, folks, listen, I'm not judging any of this. I'm relating this to Wart and Kay having a fight. Okay, I'm relating it back to the book. After the fight ends with Wart and Kay, Wart does what I would have done with my brother, Phil, or Gary, my brother Phil, blessed memory, my brother Gary, who those are the ones I would have fought with. And they kicked my butt every day because I'm 4 and 8 years younger than both of them. But I would never tell mom it was Gary. I would never tell mom it was Phil. And if a fight broke out, a fight broke out. And here's the thing, the dust settled and it was over. Wart and Kay's fight is two. Now, obviously they're not related by blood, but they're basically two brothers. One, Kay, always has the upper hand on Wart throughout the entire book until literally the last paragraphs. And then the power structure flips, forever.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Wart's weak points get exposed throughout the entire book. And yet at the end of the book, Wart has a massive flip also. Mm-hmm. So I think what I'm trying to say is that I would be very careful about judging, as you read the book, judging Kay constantly to be a hopeless jerk, because we're all hopeless jerks until that event in our life where everything seems to switch over. I'm a terrible person, but I can be very kind. I'm a very kind person, but I can be very cruel. So I think what this event the other day did for me, and as you brought up this particular fight, is that everybody in the castle knows that the two of them were fighting. They know it. When he shows up, the nurse knows, because she even says something about that. Yeah, your stepfather, or I guess, your stepfather said the same, gave me the same story. Merlin clearly knows. Everybody knows. And yet, if we just go like this, the dust settles and you give Wart and Kay a chance to become friends. And what's going to happen in this story coming up is that not only do they become friends again, but Wart ends up flipping the switch. And probably one of the few times in the stories, Kay is going to come out as kind of the hero, the hero of the story, but he's going to be the one that is applauded at the end of the story, which is very rare in the first chapters of the book.
Yeah, the line that really stood out to me was their battle had made them friends again, and each could look the other in the eye with a kind of confused affection. And I loved the confused affection because I don't have brothers biologically, but I grew up only with martial arts brothers, pretty much. And now to this day, I only really, I'm kind of surrounded by that. And so, I'm the only girl amongst the boys. And so, I get a lot of confused affection. That really spoke to me.
Right. And my brother Phil died a couple of years ago, and it broke my heart because we've got close in the last few years because we never were close growing up. In fact, and he treated me like crap, to be honest with you, in perfect candidness. About 20 years ago, he was helping at church, and he was on a ladder. And the ladder wasn't secure and it slipped. And he fell, I guess, 18, 20 feet down. And he broke both of his forearms. And I remember as clear as can be when I found out about it, I think my sister called and told me that even though I didn't really talk to Phil very much at the time, instantly there was a throb in my heart because I knew that Phil losing the ability to, my brother Phil, having obviously somebody else would have to feed him, pull up his zipper, help him out in the bathroom. I knew that my brother Phil wouldn't be able to handle that as well as anybody else I know. And I just, when I think of Kay, and I think a lot about that particular story, my brother Phil breaking his forearms, and I know at my heart's pang how much it hurt him more than hurt the rest of us. Yeah. So kind of a strange segue there. Yeah.
No, not at all. I mean, I actually knew going in, as we've had so many conversations. I think this is number 10, I believe, that of course you and your brother has had this like dynamic and all of your confused affection, right? And all of your very much love, but that there's always been like kind of those ups and downs. And I think most of us have that relationship with someone in our life, and it's often someone very close. And, not to bring any more attention to the ridiculous Oscar slapping thing that happened, because I was actually frustrated that there are so many other things in the world that we could and should be talking about. And that took such a front seat. I thought the whole thing was absolutely absurd, but it was ironic that I turned and opened the book and I'm like, oh, we're talking about the fight slap, the battle, the between the boys. And it's like, I think there's a place and time for rumble and tumble. Like you said, like maybe you need to, but I think there's also a place and time. Right. So, but yeah, I love that this was the chapter we came upon.
And Mimi, that's why I think this particular reading is so instructive about this event. So if you listen, if I was to be on if I was to write a lecture on this particular event, I would say, here's what I say. Okay. A was wrong. B was wrong. A hitting B was wrong. B talking about A's family was wrong. Walking onto the thing was wrong. Sitting back down, dropping the F-bomb was wrong. There's a lot of wrong there. There was lots of places that other people could have intervened. Having said that, it happened, and now what you do is what Wart and Kay both did. Kay emptied his heart, and he said, Merlin does everything for you. And what does Wart do? Well, the nurse gives Wart a piece of meat, right? She gives to put on his eye to pull the humors out. And what does Wart do with the piece of meat? He saves it in his pocket for his favorite hawk, Balin. And I think, to me, that's where White's genius continues to unfold. The fight is over. Everybody has done this whole little dance of here. I know. Okay, we know what happened. Here you go. Everyone's. You see how my shoulders are up and I'm uncomfortable. This is me. I'm uncomfortable. We don't know what to do. Wart, the damaged party, is given something to fix it. And the first thing Wart does is go, I don't need it. I'm going to give it to my favorite raptor who helped me out when I needed help. That's, to me, this is why I always think good comes from evil. I always do. And now it might take centuries, but good always comes from evil.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is a foundational belief of my faith tradition. For those of you who want to look it up, Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 338, just in case, good must always come from evil, because evil cannot stand. And there is evil, yes, but it'll always be turned over. And then new evil show up. Can't wait for next week to find out what we're wasting our time talking about.
That's the thing. And then, it's like this whole struggle with, but we also have to live a life where we're not just hyper focusing on things that make us sad and upset. And, because unfortunately, a lot of the important things are not uplifting things, right? No. And so it's difficult. No. It's difficult to kind of put ourselves in through that all the time. And we also have to practice that self-care. But, and this is why it's like, I love when White will say things like, Merlin said gently, right? Like sometimes Merlin can be just cranky but he'll say, like Merlin said gently, perhaps what is good for you might be bad for him. Like he's just trying to like, kind of, I just like the moments where we see a sliver of Merlin that isn't just the cranky wizard, where he's like, I'm just going to take a nap and then a nap and then a nap. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I like that he, and then, Wart goes to bat and says, Kay has to be proud because he's frightened. And it just kind of shows how perceptive he is in that moment. And sometimes Wart seems so lost, but there's glimmers of that in those statements where he really like has his belief in Kay. Like he's just so hopeful, as you say, like out of all the evil there's going to be good. And a lot of that.
When I wrote about this section, I stole 3 words out of it. Wart says, okay, Merlin explains, I'm here for you, man. Okay, to Arthur. Merlin says to Arthur, I'm here for you. All right. Okay. And then Kay said, but that's not fair. 3 words. It is unfair. I think I'm right. I think I'm quoting it exactly. It is unfair.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have the quote right. It is unfair.
Yep, it is unfair. Correct.
That particular line, it is unfair, has provided me as much comfort as scripture, poetry, of all the things I've seen written in my life. I was about to include human interaction, but that's not true. But it is unfair is really a nice, for me, a very comforting 3 words. I think I've mentioned this. Because I was born looking like this with the gender I have and the situation I have been given certain gifts, and I acknowledge that. You get a bit more of a free pass in America when you have certain things. Would you disagree with me?
I would not.
It's a slightly bit easier to be the way I am, and I know that. And I remember, and I've done my best, but sometimes I just have to stop and say and remind myself it is unfair. I'm only 6 foot. If I would have been 6'8", I'd have been a much better discus thrower. Yeah, well, that's unfair, but that's just the way it is. I certainly think if I'd have been better looking, it would have helped me a lot. And a lot of, I taught so many wonderful students, and yet so many of them who are not necessarily wonderful, had so many more opportunities. I remember one time I had one of my students just says, I'm sorry, I'm going to miss the next 6 weeks. And I go, 6 weeks, during the academic year, because mommy was going to fly him first class, 5-star hotels to all around the world. That was his 16th birthday present.
Wow.
And I said, the thing is at the end, okay, so I was against it, but I can't tell a parent what to do. And the head of academics said, you have to put together something for him to do. And, I was teaching the kid history, and I thought, well, when you travel the world, here's what I want you to do. Just keep a little journal and share some of the things you see, pictures and stuff with me afterwards. And we can talk about this, say Hong Kong versus Amsterdam, just as a visual. He gets back 6 weeks later and he sits down to do his assignment. And it's like, well, most of the time I just sat in the hotels because they were so great.
Oh, that's so painful.
And I thought to myself, that's unfair. My point is that not only would I revel in flying business class around the world, and not only would I revel, having, a concierge service take care of every whim, but I would be out the door every morning, seeing things that, it's hard to see in one lifetime by yourself, with your own eyes.
Yeah.
It's unfair.
Mhm. And I kind of want to stay on this for a bit because it's such an important lesson that it's just a fact of what is. Like, we need air to breathe. That's just a fact, right? And it's unfair is like you said, pretty impacting. I know that you've spent a lot of time, not just coaching, but also through your other work. You've gone to prisons, you've done stuff where you've mentored people, and you've also been there. I don't want to say spiritual leader or anything, but I know you work with the church a lot. And how does one? I don't know if the right word is comfort, but how does one help others accept that? Or is acceptance the right thing to say, like, well, we just have to accept that it's unfair? Or is there a better way?
Okay, I didn't plan this. I didn't plan this at all. Can I read a letter I just got?
Yeah, 100%.
It'll take a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay, a few seconds. All right, I just got this. Mr. John, you do not remember me. I, however, remember you quite well, and you always will be grateful for your impact in my life. When I was in the 8th grade at my elementary school, you came to our class and spoke to us. I remember you speaking about how you lost part of your tongue, the mention of baseball in the Bible. It's a series of jokes, I told him, and every other pearl and nugget. At that point in time, you were hands down the best speaker I'd ever seen. I went on to attend high school. I played football under a terrible program. I toyed with the idea of track and field. The next few times I saw you, you were coaching at an opposing team at a school that we were hyped up to as our rival. My junior year, I found drugs, I found booze, I lost my compass. I was kicked out of school. A few years went by in a blink of an eye. I realized I was about to lose my free will. I decided to donate that free will to the Army instead of the correctional system. Now you're going to probably ask how this is good. Where was your impact? If you even see this, I know you're a busy man. Years later, I was on my second of what would be 4 combat tours, living in a small compound with 17 other men in a place that wasn't the most friendly. We had a rusty bar, a few chip plates, some duffel bags full of sand, and the tow chains that we later learned really should have stayed on our trucks. I stumbled by your name on a Testosterone Nation post. It rang a bell I hadn't heard in a long time. I began reading everything you ever wrote that was free. The rest I begged, borrowed, and stole. I read your works on strength and conditioning, the things you had written in college, articles from the Intermountain Catholic, T-Nation, all your books, and then all the books you recommended. Towards the end of my tour, my team had a bad day. Things you said to a kid in 8th grade led me pray for the first time in years. I found God in the worst place I could imagine. Years later, I found love. Your comments on marriage saved mine. Whether it was a drinking, not watching porn, or simply making time, you gave me a template. Then we were blessed with children. Most of the things I found you wrote were brief entries about your then teens, but that commentary also held lessons for my terrible 2s, 3s, and everything else that follow. I am transitioning out of the Army now, having played this game at the highest level with honor. I firmly believe that you had not spoken to my class. This would be enough. I would have chosen prison for no other reason. I'm in amazing shape despite some awesome injuries, but which is also to your credit. I've since purchased all your books, having read them. Hopefully someday I can attend a seminar or bump into you at an event where you're not an opposing coach I was told to hate. I really like to shake your hand.
Wow.
That's what we do. To me, I wrote an article years ago that I'm just a wrench. I'm a hammer. I'm a pry bar. I'm just a tool, and not that negative sense. But I never know when the universe wants me to be a screwdriver, and all I have. My job is to simply take what I know, the skill set I have, do it, and then continue on the journey to the next job. And sometimes when you do prison ministry, you do a silly little workshop at a school and you make a few jokes, you just don't know that 20 or 30 years later, the impact you have. And so I think what's important, I think what's important is that we all have influences. We constantly influence other people. But the issue is we just don't know it. And so maybe there are days where you and I walk through and all we do is turn on lights and illuminate rooms and just walk away. And our impact is so important. You just don't know whether your impact is going to be the most positive thing ever happened or the not most positive thing that ever happened. Pardon me for just a second.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's my allergies.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
And
so that literally just came this morning. So
wow.
So it makes me rethink some things, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. As an educator, teacher as well, it's funny because I kind of say the same thing. I'm like, sometimes you have to wait 20 years to like hear any feedback or feel any gratitude or, you know, find out what happened to those people that you, you know, kind of touched on through your life, right? You kind of like went through life and you didn't know. And I have certainly impacted people in negative ways in my time, for sure. Lots. But as I've aged as a teacher, I've been trying to teach my, you know, students who are now teaching that, you know, everything you say matters. And especially when we're teaching those kids, like they absorb everything and you don't know what it means to them to have like this hour of the day. And if you just try to make the best hour of the day and you don't know what's going on in their household, why they're a little jerk in class, like maybe you don't know what's happening in their home. And this is, you know, so you have an opportunity and we definitely have to do the best we can with those opportunities that we are privileged to have. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I have a minor tradition. So at Discus Camp, we had 4 sessions a day. And the first one was I think it was at 7:30 or something like that. And you know, when I coach American football, we have those double sessions, you know, or what we did. I don't know if we still allowed to have them anymore, but I always start the morning out. I shout out to the team. One day you will thank me. Today is not that day. And tomorrow doesn't look very good either.
I love it. I'm gonna use that. I'm totally gonna steal that. Because what good teachers do is steal from other good coaches and mentors. So totally stealing that. And my students will have to hear that. But yeah, this is I always say, I learned so much from my podcast and conversations, especially when I'm speaking with you. It's this, you know, deep dive into this philosophy, but I think today is very special for sure. So thank you for that. It kind of struck me in my head when you were talking about the kid who sat in the hotel room because they were so cool around the world. Yeah. How Merlin talked about napping and then napping and then napping, and that he was going to take a nap. And then after that, another nap. And like how apparently we sleep a third of our life. And, you know, that gives me kind of like a FOMO thing. Like, oh gosh, maybe I shouldn't be sleeping. But like, it's just funny because it reminded me, like, sometimes if we're not awake or paying attention, we'll miss everything. Right. But I just thought that whole, and then I'm going to nap after lunch. And then after that, I'll have another nap. Like I thought.
And then Archimedes says, well, maybe take a nap? I don't know.
Yeah. And then, yes. Archimedes has so few lines, but the ones he has are always like a punch, you know?
If we could just slide back a little bit, you know, right after he says it is unfair. Yeah. Ward tries to argue with him. And then Merlin tells him this rabbinical story.
Yes, Elijah and the rabbi.
Right over the head of Arthur. Funny thing is, that story went right over my head most of my life. Okay. And now I find myself sometimes telling a telling someone a story that, okay, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll just tell them something that's like, and I'll get that look that Arthur is giving, man, thank you.
He goes, it's a nice story.
It's a nice story, but it takes
nice sort of story. That's what he says.
But it takes, either the story means nothing, and it may never mean nothing to the listener, or years and years and years and years later, you'll go, oh, that's what Coach Lahati was trying to say. Oh, and then this little crack will open. That's why I'm such a big fan of rereading, is because how many times you read that story? So wait a second, you fix this guy's fence. Yeah, but he would have found gold behind there. And was it the cow died? And the cow died.
The cow.
Yeah. I don't. But later you'll have stories in your life where, the cow died. Something bad happened, but something not as bad was happening at the same time. I constantly think about, when I found out that we were pregnant with Lindsay, coming home from my father's funeral. And, I hate to say this, but the cow died. It was one of those stories where my dad died, but it's okay. They've got Leo celebrating his first birthday 2 days ago now.
Oh.
And, I buried my father, and now I play with Leo. And that to me is like, sometimes these little stories, that's why education is so important. And all those silly stories you read are so important. It's not for, these, when you're reading Aesop or Aesop's fables as a third grader, you're like, whatever. Well, sour grapes, yeah, whatever. Okay. Sour grapes, whatever you want me to say, I'll say, okay. But okay. But later down the line, when you bump into somebody who has a sour, not long ago, in fact, it was St. Patrick's, I got a bunch of texts from somebody who wanted me to get them into the most popular Celtic, Irish, Scottish pub here in town at about 9:00 on St. Patrick's. Called me at my house so I could pull some levers to get them in.
Some Dan John strings.
Yeah. And the last text was, "That's okay. I heard it wasn't very fun anyway." And I thought to myself, sour grapes. Yeah. And it was funny because if I say that to my grandson right now, it was sour grapes. And if he's not familiar with Aesop's fables, he'll be like, okay, I guess so, Grandpa. And he'll just keep walking.
And I think people have also heard the expression, but have no idea where it's from as well, right?
Context, yeah. Which is why elementary education is so good. It's not just taking tests every other week.
Right.
But actually learning. That's kind of my knock to jump ahead. Ever since Bush had that thing called No Child Left Behind, and they decided that they would figure that out by test scores, I thought, could you imagine if we did that in the weightlifting world? Okay. You can't power clean 85 pounds. You're a failure in life. What did I do? I'm a fourth grader.
Yeah, that standardized testing is rough. I found that once that had started, children were afraid to answer questions because they're so programmed to like, I need to get the right answer. There's only one answer here. And I'm like, it's an opinion. I'm asking your opinion. And they just they didn't want to engage in like critical thinking or answering questions as clear. It was, yeah. So when I'm teaching, I always try to get them to kind of think, imagine that, and I want to know their opinion. Sometimes I just ask them open-ended questions, and they had a lot of difficulty ever since the standardized testing. I have kids that would like throw up the week of their testing, and that's all they hyper focused on. And they have now put that as a priority of what they think is education and important. And it's very frustrating. So I spend half my time trying to teach that more so than Kung Fu stuff, like teaching them to actually engage. And it's okay to actually also get an answer wrong, because then that's how you learn the right one. But also there's not always a right and wrong answer. Sometimes it's just learning to, have these conversations. So I felt a deficit in kids.
Now flip back So think about what's have been going on in America for at least the last 6 years, probably longer. Chris Rock gets slapped by Will Smith. Who was right and who was wrong? Now, here's the problem, that one. There's no good answer. I don't think there's a good answer at all. I know this. If you say, I got a video of my daughter defending somebody else. It was at a bar and someone did something inappropriate. My daughter defended. I think she was in the right, but Dan, you're condoning fighting. Well, I don't know if I'm condoning fighting, but are you following my point here? Where
I do. I feel like it's more nuanced because it's such a specific example, but this is a conversation where it's also an opinion, right? And I have mine and someone else will have a completely opposite one, right?
And you can certainly disagree with me, and I have no issue. But with your students this week, this is a wonderful opportunity because you're teaching an art of, I'm going to use the word self-defense, but it's also, there is in the martial arts, there is that relationship between, self-protection and self-protection can edge over into aggressively defeating an enemy, an aggressor. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to do is, so what I would do is this, and if you don't, I know we're uncomfortable. I know there's tension with us talking about this particular story. I can sense it.
Not at all. I just don't know how much my listeners want to hear my rant about it.
But here's the thing.
On this one, anyway.
At the Academy Awards, why 2/3, 3/4 of the way did they bring in a comedian to poke fun that late in the show at the people winning awards? So in a sense, listen to how I'm blaming the producer who decided to have Chris Rock speak at that time of the day. Somebody else is going to go, my point is, whenever you talk about, there was one time my students were going to go to Washington, D.C. And I told them there's a specific place on the Vietnam War Memorial where if you put your hand on it like this, 5 of my brother Gary's friends are right there on your hand, and they've all died. And I told them, I don't remember the exact number, so I'm going to hold off on it. But I used to have it on. I had the picture on the wall in my classroom, and it was a reminder to me how close it was to lose another brother. It was a reminder to me about how sacred this journey is. And the kids told me that one kid told me after doing that, it was so weird because they noticed as they stood up, just doing that in honor of their teacher, in honor of their teacher's brother, they would stand up and they looked and they noticed that people were, I won't quote the child exactly, but he used I would never correct this. He was angry because people around him were, and I'll just gently say, effing around. And it bothered the hell out of him. And here's the problem I would have if my brother would have died in Vietnam. What were we doing there? Who made this? You see what I'm saying? I'm not going to blame the Viet Cong or the Vietnamese soldier. I'm going to blame, you see.
Yeah. How are we in this situation?
How did we get there?
Because other decisions were made, 100%. I think the frustration with me on the subject is also that we are constantly talking about the two men in the situation when the victim of the situation is the one that really should have been addressed more so, like how mindfulness of her feelings and mindfulness of, well, what is she thinking or how, and I feel like that should have been her husband's stance as well, was to immediately tend to her needs versus what he thinks he needed to do in a public stage at that moment to a comedian. So I think that's where my frustration lies greatly, because every headline is them, right? And I'm like, it's not about them.
If it's you and me and we're together and he says that, and I get on bended knee and grab both of your hands and say, you're the most beautiful thing in the world, how much more powerful would that have been?
Definitely. And like, do we want to leave this situation right now? Are you know, how are like, yeah, I would have, yeah, absolutely. And then maybe the quote unquote bad guy would be looking like a bad guy at that point, right? Like it's you decide who is the villain by your actions.
I could have planned this. I couldn't have planned it better. I mean,
it's Merlin. Merlin planned this.
If I grab
He's a wizard.
If I get to bend a knee, grab your hands, and just say, "Let's just leave right now," and I comfort you, and we just quietly walk out of the auditorium. Wow.
Right? 20 minutes before you're supposed to get your award too, right? Like you are more important than all of that. That would have been impressive. That would have been a deserved standing applause, not the speech he gave.
Yes. It's now, do you follow now? And I'm with you. See, this is why we were talking about open-ended questions.
Right. And again, listeners, it's my opinion.
But this is why so it goes back to why I'm against the no. And here's the problem. You say no child left behind. How could you disagree with that?
Right. Well, that's the point of a lot of the legislation here in Florida. They title it one thing, but it means another. That's another conversation for another time.
Okay. God, I said it. But this is why yes and no, true, false. It's the letter C on multiple choice answers are fine for the lowest level of learning. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't get you through. So when you go through, and this is true for not only knowledge, but moral development, is if we choose to simply slap or whatever. But what I like about where we are in this chapter is it comes right down. It is unfair. And then Merlin tries to explain it with a story. That doesn't work. They have to have an adventure. It goes on. It's one of the longest stories in the entire book, right? I think it is. It's three chapters at least. The events that are coming up are 3 chapters at least. Mm-hmm. It's the longest story by like an arc. Mm-hmm. Arc. Thank you. That's the phrase. It's the longest arc in the entire story, and it's all based. And the root of it is a simple little fist fight, and then it ends up with a very, very, very famous. And in fact, this is the original artwork.
Yep.
From the author. Okay, so the book over Mimi's right shoulder. The illustrator. That's the original picture from the illustrator.
Wow. Yep.
That's I couldn't have planned this any better.
Today is full of that.
And this is their triumphal return to the castle. Wart will have his arm in a sling. It'll take him a long time to heal. Kay did something right. Kay was everybody's happy. But it starts with brother hitting brother. And it ends up, but here's what you have to understand. And I think this brings us back so well. It took a while. It took chapters for that little fight to get resolved. Mm-hmm. Why am I so heavy today? What?
It's me. I brought it up. I bring it out in you. You say that multiple times throughout our episodes.
How did I
bring it out? But there's so much there because the confused affection we have for people like that in our life often takes years to resolve. And so like in this book, it's giving it the longest length of time. Like that's certainly the case. And I can say there's a lot of confused affection I have that still has not yet to be resolved. We're still in the woods, in Robin Wood's woods.
Yeah, in Robin Wood. What you said, and this is why conversation's so important. And you got to let me talk. And here's the thing, if I'm going up on the stage, I'm doing more than slapping him. Okay, that's what I just said. But a better response was for me to grab your hands and say, let's get out of here. This is inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Boy,
a more powerful response as well, stronger for the,
that video of them, the two of them, him holding her hands, walking out. Oh my God. Yeah, but here's the thing. It would, but that's why we have this conversation.
Yeah. And
I started my morning thinking that I got to have to teach Will Smith how to, either use an elbow or, and now I'm like, no, Will, you should have used you had the open palm right, but the open palm should have been, I think her name is Jade. I think
Jada.
Jada. Okay. Mm-hmm. The open palm should have been towards Jada to comfort.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know what?
You're right. This is why conversation is important. And I love having these conversations. I'm grateful.
I got to tell you, gentle listener, as you're listening in, little Danny John got schooled today in this, I learned something. And, in my, and I think that's why we do this kind of thing. I think that's why that's why rereading and conversing about great books, and I'm going to say The Sword and the Stone is a great book. In the last 50 to 100 years, I would put The Sword and the Stone in that. I'd put Dune in there. Personally, I'd put The Godfather in there. I would put Cormac McCarthy's The Road. There's obviously a bunch of other books, obviously, but the reason I mention those is because when people read those books, they look at them as kind of a lot of action and adventure. But when I read those books, the four I just mentioned, if you were to pull out all the sword fighting, the spacecrafts, the gun battles, mm-hmm. and read the conversation, the interactions that those books are, that's why I consider them classics. The love story in The Road, people who've read The Road would be like, wait, what? The father and son, the father and son, it's just the father loves his son and he doesn't get a single break. The environment's terrible. Everyone else is terrible, but he loves his son. And it's a beautiful story. It's horrible, beautiful. And maybe that's, when people lean back and they talk about war, and I've seen people do this, and I've seen my brother's eyes go off. I've seen my uncle's eyes go off. And they talk about, when they try to explain it, there is this beauty to this experience. It's horrific, but it's beautiful. I've been present for birth, and anybody who says birth is beautiful is insane.
Oh, I say that all the time.
I also understand it completely. Watching this all happen is like, whoa! But I'm hearing Leo's yapping about something upstairs right now. So it is. So sometimes in life, the edge between beauty and whatever the opposite of beauty is what makes us human. And so in our, and it's an old phrase. It's been said by many. I always like the way that Kahlil Gibran said it. In your saddest moments, look into your heart, and you'll see the reason you're so sad is because it's your happiest moments. And at your happiest moments, look into your heart, and you'll see the root, the seed of your saddest moments. So when I think back on my greatest triumphs as an athlete, I can instantly switch back to what led me to that was the lowest point in my athletic career. And when I think about my happiest moments in life, I look back and I can see the seeds of my saddest. When I look at my saddest points in my life, my mother's funeral, some other events recently, I see the roots of the happiest moments in my life. and it sounds strange to have this conversation off of this particular section, but I think this section, when you get away from the battle, when you get away from the cool, the Marion she's this hot chick, Marion's this hot chick that Wirt has obviously a crush on. Pull that up. What you come back into is one of the most human stories in the whole story. It is unfair.
Well, as a podcaster, I have to know that that's where we have to end it because it's so well said. So well said. I don't think I want to follow anything. I don't want to follow up with anything to have that out of anyone's mind. And we definitely, listeners have a lot to digest, I think, through this conversation today.
I don't know if it's completely legal, but if you'd want to post my notes, would you want them?
I have some of your notes, but yeah, I mean, you mean for the chapters that you would put the end of Wandering Waits?
Yeah. Do you want to post the notes on this particular one?
I would, be honored to. So yeah, you could send me the updated one perhaps, because I think I had one when it wasn't finished. And then I told you, as we've done our study together, that I don't read them again, because of course I've read them in the newsletters, but I don't read them as we study until after I've gone through, because I feel like it's cheating. And I'm such a stickler for the rules. So yeah, I always like to look back after we've had a conversation and after I've done my reread and my,
sure.
And it's been good. So I would certainly appreciate that. And wow, I'm looking forward to our next conversation, because we'll really be jumping into that chapter 10 and through, which takes us to the fun Robin Wood journey and all of that. But this is certainly a great wrap up to chapter 9, and the lessons that we learned today are great.
It is always a delight to talk to you. Okay.
Likewise. So we will post all the show notes here, which will have extensive ones today, which is very exciting. Thank you so much for being able to share that. And listeners, just hang tight, because of course, Coach Dan John will absolutely be back on the show.
Absolutely. And we'll talk very soon. Okay.
Absolutely. Bye.
All right. Thank you.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.